and Aliyah Chronicles, one of three-part webinar series based on considerations when making Aliyah. Last week we had our first, which was about careers and continuity with career when you make Aliyah from the UK. And today we're discussing assets. What do you do with your assets when you are looking to relocate? My name's Francesca, and I'm head of marketing at Assison Law Offices. We're a British law firm with our largest office in Israel and the Israeli Centre. I'm just going to wait for people to take their seats, and then we'll start. We'll commence. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Assison's Aliyah Chronicles, one in a three-part webinar series where we discuss various considerations when making Aliyah. Last week we had our first webinar, which was talking about big considerations surrounding your career, upping and leaving the UK and making Aliyah, what to do with your career. Today we're talking about assets. I have to preface before we start that most of us, except for Gillian on our panel, are based in Israel. And as everyone knows, we're in the middle of a war. So at any given moment, we can get a siren and we might get an alert, which means that we will need to make our way to a safe room, which means you're going to have to bear with us. But Gillian will hold the fort because she's in the UK. So she's got lots of wisdom to impart. So we just want to let everyone know that if we all suddenly get something on our phones and we have to disappear for a few minutes, Gillian will keep everything going. We're first going to start by introducing everyone on the panel. Everyone on the panel is from the UK and made Aliyah, so everyone's got their own story. So I first would like to call upon Dalia to introduce herself and tell us her Aliyah story.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you, and thank you all for coming today. Unfortunately, my photo isn't here since I actually made Aliyah when I was a young teenager, and don't remember if I have any photos from that day. I came from North London, and I was a Henrietta Barnett schoolgirl, and I made Aliyah with my mother and sisters. And I actually was thrown straight into very Israeli community. I wasn't in a British speaking community. I was thrown straight into high school and had to finish my last year of high school. And I didn't speak any Hebrew when I came here. So I had to battle what's through going kind of surviving as a teenager. And it makes you much stronger, obviously, as a somebody that obviously at the age of 15, 16 had no idea of no direction. So obviously family support really helped me. I ended up doing the IDF for 2 years and then studying law. I'm a certified Israeli solicitor, or as we call it, attorney here, and also I'm certified in the UK. I also am a public notary, and at the age of 23, I opened up my own law firm here in Israel. And today we have especially an immigration law firm that specializes in immigration to Israel, to the UK, and also to the US. And I think I'll pass over the mic over to Claire.
Hi, so I'm Claire Chalamet. I made Aliyah 12 years ago now. And when I look back, I didn't really know at the time why I was making Aliyah. I just felt a pull to live in Israel. And despite growing up in London, Northwest London, also a Henrietta Barnett girl, I never really considered the UK to be my home. So for me, the transition of moving to Israel was very smooth, and I immediately felt at home here. It also helped that I managed to keep my job that I had in the UK for the first 5 years when I was out here. I then, about 7, 8 years ago, opened my own company. We're a UK tax boutique based in Tel Aviv, specializing in UK tax advisory, tax dispute resolution, and then what's relevant for most people here, dealing with UK, Israel cross tax issues. What I will say is actually now in the more challenging times, let's say in Israel, it actually cements for me more the reason why I made Aliyah. And I'll pass on to whoever's next.
So maybe we'll pass on to Scott.
Hi everyone, my name's Scott Harris. I made Aliyah about 4 years ago, driven by some of the reasons mentioned by others already. Concerns about the situation in the UK, not feeling like it was necessarily home for me, and also somewhat attracted by the financial opportunities, which I will touch upon later. I'll pass on to whoever's next.
Andrew?
Hi.
Good morning.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Album. We made Aliyah to Renana in 2007 with as you can see, with my wife and 4 young girls who were young at the time. They're all a lot bigger now. We've lived in Renana ever since.
Thank you. I'm just going to, before I pass on to Gillian, I realised that I didn't tell you my Aliyah story. I made Aliyah about 7 years ago. My background was PR and communications, and I made Aliyah single with 5 friends. We went to Opan Etzion, and then I met my husband from South Africa. We were in class together. We dated, we got married, which is a very nice story. We live in Renana now with our 2 daughters. And yeah, and I work in PR and communications and business development basically, and I work at Aston. But I wanted to just also tell you that if you've got, obviously you might have questions on this, but I would imagine you have questions on the subject matters that are to come. If you've got questions, you should put them in the Q&A or in the chat or anything, because we will address them at the end. So feel free to like speak in the chat and the Q&A. And then the last person that's going to talk about their story is not actually sitting in Israel. So I'll hand it over to Gillian. Yeah.
Good afternoon from Manchester. My name's Gillian and I am a partner in Asterson in the real estate team. As you can hear from my accent, I'm Belfast born and bred, and I studied at the University of Manchester, and in my second year got my first job as a trainee solicitor, which is how they recruited back in the day. I am 20 years qualified and started in large national firms in the UK. And when almost 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to join an Israeli-based firm, I absolutely jumped at the choice. I jumped at the chance. So I love working in Asterson. I love all things Israel. I'm delighted to be a part of today, and hopefully I can share some of my real estate knowledge with you during this call.
Just to clarify, we're not an Israeli firm. Our biggest office, our largest office is in Israel, but we actually practice only English law. So Gillian is obviously a UK real estate lawyer. So I think the next stage is that we just want to put a poll out for the audience. We thought of 5 or 6 major subject matters that would be relevant to you, and I think that would be quite nice for you to just vote what you'd like to hear first, and according to whatever's like the most votes, we'll tackle first. So go ahead. Okay, great. Kate Taylor, have the votes come in?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what's our first subject matter?
Hold on, people are still voting.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, so the first question is, should I sell, hold, or lease my UK property?
Okay, well, I think that's for Gillian, but I'd rather Gillian deal with that at the end, just in case we hit a siren. So I know that Scott might have to drop off earlier. So could we just start firstly with Scott's, and then we can carry on according to the poll?
Sure.
I think that's on, hold on one second, Taylor, it's on the restructuring. So if we just get up the slide about the offshore investments. Scott, you can start. Well, the slide will come up.
I realise I didn't mention earlier, I'm a chartered surveyor and one of 3 directors in a company called KHK Capital Limited. we specialize in short-term property finance in the UK, known as bridging finance. And why this ties into the whole Aliyah and assets topic is because originally I came from a family that's heavily invested in real estate, residential and commercial, holding, managing, and obviously moving to Israel puts some challenges on that, and also has tax implications. And
I can't hear you, Scott. Can anyone else not hear him? I don't know if your microphone's not working. You just cut out and now we can't hear you. Try again.
sorry, can you hear me? Where did you hear up till?
You came from a family who managed property, and moving to Israel might be problematic with that.
Yeah, so when you're moving to Israel, I wanted to have a lot more liquidity and not be necessarily tied into fixed assets in the UK. And the beauty of KHK Capital and what we do is that we have a diversified pool of loans across, say, 200 real estate assets. We have a corporate bond which is listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. And we are also about to launch a product in Guernsey, which is in a tax efficient wrapper, which means if you invest in the product in Guernsey, that until you withdraw your money from that fund, there's no tax payable in the UK. And if you were to make Aliyah, for example, and you get the 10-year tax-free benefits in Israel, you can then withdraw that money and all the interest it's earned tax-free. So as a family, obviously talking about this as my business, but also as a family, what we've sort of done is sell down our physical real estate holdings and invest alongside other investors in KHK Capital, my company, and the bond we have. And the loan book is about £130 million. The average loan to value is only 65%, with a 5% first loss held by directors. And the money can be redeemed on 3 months' notice, paying a coupon of about 9% per annum, which makes it a highly attractive and liquid investment for those who may be looking to move to Israel at a later date.
Thank you, Scott. What's our next one, Taylor, now according to the poll?
UK tax issues for Aliyah.
Over to you, Claire.
Sure. Hi. Okay, so this webinar is quite timely as 2026 is the year of change in a number of tax principles that affects both the UK and Israel. So I want to run through a few of these basic principles with you today. So we'll start with residency. So in the UK, there's a statutory residency test that clearly tells you when you become UK resident and when you become non-UK resident. Broadly, if you're in the UK for under 16 days, you're non-resident, and more than 183 days, you're resident. Now, for most people, especially after moving country, you're going to fall somewhere in the middle into the grey zone, at which point you have to look at your ties to the country to determine your residency. And the UK looks at things like family ties, accommodation ties, work ties. It looks at where you've spent time in previous tax years to come up with the conclusion of whether you're UK tax resident or not. Normally, your tax residency applies, or non-residency applies to the full tax year, which is 6th of April to 5th of April. Now, in Israel, the tax year is 1st of January to 31st of December, which complicates things. And in the UK, subject to strict conditions, you may be able to have a split tax year, where for part of it you're non-resident, part of it you're resident. On the flip side, in Israel, Israel also has its own residency tests. At the moment, it looks at your centre of life, which is quite similar to the ties that we discussed in relation to the UK. So where your home is, where your family is, where you work, etc. Israel's actually put together a proposed residency reform. It's in draft and it hasn't come into play yet. Very broadly, what it will do, it will impact the amount of time people can spend in Israel. What it does, which is quite unusual, when it looks at a 3-year period of time spent in Israel, it also, at a certain point in time, it will look at future tax years. So if you want to determine if you're resident in 2026, it would look at how much time you will spend, or if you're looking backwards, have spent in 2027 and 2028. And very few jurisdictions look at future tax years to determine residency. It really complicates matters. And in a nutshell, it could be that if you live in the UK, and if this reform comes into place, if you spend 75 days in Israel, you could accidentally fall into this trap of becoming tax resident. Now, with tax residency, there's always two sides of the coin. You may have advice only in the UK, you may only have advice in Israel, but ultimately both have to be put together. You could also fall into being dual tax resident, where you're resident in both countries, in which case you need professional advice to determine where you're tax resident. The exact date of becoming resident or non-resident is important, because for the 10-year tax exemption benefits in Israel, which I'll talk about quickly, is determined from the date that you become Israeli tax resident. And often the date that you think you've made Aliyah doesn't tie in with what the Israeli tax authority thinks. Okay, so the 10-year tax exemptions, which is normally everyone's favorite subject. So again, 2026 is a big year of change for those benefits, some pros, some cons. So generally, the 10-year tax exemptions apply to olim, or some returning residents, in relation to non-Israeli sourced income and gains. So we're talking about your UK investments, your UK pension income, which is obviously very important to many people here. And quickly on that point, you would have 10 years of not paying tax on your pension income in either country, which is very advantageous. And selling assets outside of the Israel wouldn't be taxed in Israel. Now, before 2026, you wouldn't need to tell Israel any details in relation to these non-taxable assets. Again, people use this to their advantage as they saw fit. From 2026, if you made Aliyah from the 1st of January, you have disclosure rules in place where essentially you're giving more information. You're not being taxed on these income and gains, but you're telling Israel about what you have, which puts people in a very difficult position and perhaps opens people up to more questions and potential investigations. One of the key issues that I see coming up a lot for olim, for those that come with UK companies. So you still keep your company in the UK and you're working from Israel and you're traveling back and forth. Now, normally, Israel would suggest that you divide your income based on time spent in or out of the country. Seems fair, but in many circumstances, that won't be the best method that truly shows where income is generated. So this comes into this grey zone where there's lots of different methodologies going on. And from whoever makes Aliyah post January 2026, they're essentially will have to expose this information to the Israeli tax authority. Now, last night was the final reading of the Israeli budget in the Knesset, and it was passed. So the new rules that you may have been hearing about, which are very advantageous, if you made Aliyah or you make Aliyah in 2026, And actually, they extended it. So if you made Aliyah in November 2025 onwards, but up till the end of 2026, so this doesn't apply to you if you come, say, on the 1st of January 2027. When you come for the first 2 years for 2026 and 2027, there's 0% tax on your Israeli earned income. There is a ceiling on it. The first year it's 600,000 shekel, which isn't so much, and then it increases to 1 million shekel, which I think's quite generous. And then the rate increases by 10% up until 2030. So the timing of when you make Aliyah, and that goes back to when are you actually resident, because you don't want to miss out by a day or two. 2026 is a very advantageous year to make Aliyah. Okay, and then another point that's quite new for those the people that call themselves between the UK and Israel, so they might come for a few years, but they're not quite sure, might move back to the UK. And bear in mind that returns to the UK can be unplanned. We've had COVID that no one expected. There's no shortage of different types of wars. If you return to the UK within 5 tax years, you fall into this area of what's called in the UK temporarily non-UK residents. That means that certain income and gains that arose when you were non-resident can then be taxed in the UK on your return. So it's a very nasty trap, and it's something to think about. Again, many of you might have your own companies in the UK, or you might set up companies in Israel. If you are the only shareholder, or actually if there are only 5 shareholders, so it's your own company, you're essentially controlling the company, and you move to Israel and then you take dividends from the company, whether it's UK or non-UK, and then you return within 5 tax years to the UK, all the dividends you took would then become taxable in the UK. So that's definitely a point for planning of how to extract income if you're making Aliyah, but you're not sure how long you're going to stay here or if you're going to stay here. And the last point that I'll mention, which is everyone's favorite tax, UK inheritance tax. Again, 2026 is another rule change. It actually came in from April 25, where they changed the rules for how long you're tied to the UK for inheritance tax. Broadly, if you leave the UK for 10 tax years, you're still tied for UK inheritance tax. So you could actually not have any UK assets, make Aliyah, and God forbid, if something happens with 9 years, your assets in Israel or anywhere else would still be subject to UK inheritance tax. Many families look at options of gifting assets or selling assets in order to mitigate the inheritance tax. And the timing, again, of when and how you sell those assets are important, and you should take professional advice on that. So in conclusion, the key probably to all of making Aliyah is checking your residency position in both countries, looking at what assets you have, the tax implications, how you can use tax benefits in both countries really to your advantage, and looking at least a 5-year period for making Aliyah.
Thank you, Claire. Taylor, what's the next one? Short term versus long term? I think that's Dahlia's.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for being here today. I want to put my perspective specifically on the differences between maybe what you are considering now. So we have many clients from the UK and Canada and Australia, Jewish people, who are either planning Aliyah now, or maybe they're quietly planning or preparing for the option in the future. And that distinction today, I kind of want to just discuss a little bit between now and maybe your options. So probably everybody in the room now that your wealth is probably tied up between your property and pensions, and investment portfolios. And probably what you're thinking of is, should I sell before I move, or should I keep my assets in the UK? And what we kind of see now are perhaps two groups of people. Those of you who feel a real sense of urgency right now, they're moving in the near term. Most of you in that group may be driven by some geopolitical concern, maybe some anti-Semitism that your families are facing today. Maybe it's a family situation, so maybe one of your kids wants to volunteer or enlist in the IDF and you want to join them. And maybe some people have already got their date in their diary that they're actually already planning the move. And then there's the second group of people. And I would say that these are the strategic planners who are kind of pondering with the idea, if we had to leave the UK one day, where should we go? And they're not necessarily leaving tomorrow, but they do want that plan B and they want to prepare for it, maybe when the day arrives. And, you know, it could be that something changes economically or politically or socially, and you need to protect your assets. And this is where Israel doesn't actually, it becomes actually very attractive, because you're going to be comparing yourself with maybe the other options of Miami, maybe Dubai, maybe Tuscany. And so I think that Claire has touched on a lot of very interesting issues. And actually, for this disclaimer, because I am a solicitor, I'm not a tax expert, but I do just want to just touch over some of those things once again in regards to the idea of Israel becoming and trying to promote itself actually as a very attractive destination when you compare it with those other areas, Miami, Dubai. I've heard of many different options. And I think that the most important thing right now is this exemption for the foreign sourced income for 10 years, which is a really significant and a unique benefit in Israel, covering obviously passive income, as Claire spoke about, real estate, capital gains, disposal of foreign sale shares. But also there's an issue that is currently being determined right now, as in also active income, which is something that's going to be quite interesting, and going to see how it actually plays out in regards to the terms that Claire spoke about with the residency being in Israel. So what they're specifically talking about now is actually expanding the advantageous benefits of the tax, because they're trying to now focus actually on the higher earners of those countries that are coming from abroad. And what they are considering and hopefully putting into law will be that income generated in Israel will actually be exempt from tax for 5 years. As long as this is the income itself is actually generated from outside of Israel. So you could actually effectively be living here in Israel, but you have a salary from the UK. And this is emphasized specifically while immigrants already received their tax exemptions. There is also specific credit points on their taxation that can even entitle you to up to 3,000 to 9,000 shekels a year less taxation. That's specifically also for working women here in Israel, and also on working women that have children as well. The tax exemptions go on that. So I just wanted to give you a type of illustration. So for example, if we were to take, hypothetically, Rachel, she would own an ice cream shop in Leeds. She's paid a salary, for example, in the UK. Or she takes a dividend, and she relocates to Israel in 2026, but she also rents out a property. So for example, in total, her annual salary of about 120,000 plus around 30,000 for her property, she would be looking at around 150,000 pound combined foreign income. And effectively, you could possibly look at zero exemption, zero tax on exemption on that exemption period, which effectively could last even up to 10 years. So obviously all of this has to be specifically advised by your tax advisors and how to strategically plan this. But I definitely would put Israel at the top there on one of those planning when you are considering how to benefit tax-wise.
Great, thank you, Dalia. Next up, I think, who is it, Taylor? It's Andrew. Hi, Andrew. Over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Are we putting the slides up on the screen?
This is the slide.
Right. Okay, great. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Album. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to some key wealth management and financial planning issues. But just before I start, a little bit of background, which is that I am a senior wealth manager at Pioneer Wealth, who are Israel's leading wealth managers catering to the Olim market. We have 40 years experience looking after people who've made Aliyah, how to plan their finances successfully in Israel. I'm also for 30 years been a senior wealth manager at the UK's leading wealth management company, which gives me an incredible depth of experience of all issues relating to UK financial planning for from taxation issues to investment, trust and inheritance tax issues. And I'm sure many of you have been on other webinars before. You've heard other comments about how to plan your finances before you make Aliyah. I think I should point out that there's a really big and important key difference between what I'm going to tell you and what you might be hearing elsewhere. And that is that most of the people who speak at these webinars are not qualified and licensed in Israel. They are UK advisors. They are recommending solutions that are regulated in the UK for UK investors. That's very different from financial planning, which is in what's needed for people making Aliyah. And not planning your finances properly before you make Aliyah or even after you make Aliyah is going to expose you to some very significant risks which could undermine your financial security in Israel. And I'm going to very, very quickly highlight 6 of them at a very high level. The first is currency risk. The shekel has been the world's strongest currency for the best part of the last 15 years. As anyone who comes from the UK knows, the pound used to trade at 8.7 to the shekel. Now it buys you 4.1, 4.15 shekels. The pound has lost half its value against the shekel. The dollar's lost a third of its value against the shekel. If you want financial security in Israel, you need to think about the fact that your income should be matching your expenses. That means you need to be with a firm that can manage a portfolio in shekel, just as everyone else does in pounds or dollars, to give you peace of mind of regular income without the exchange rate risk. Because the shekel obviously never falls in value against the shekel, and it's the only currency that you can say that about. The reason for the shekel strengths are many. If anybody wants to message me, I can send you an article I recently had published in the Jewish Chronicle in London, which explains the key reasons for the shekel strength. The second risk you're going to expose yourself to is asset allocation. Lots of people who make Aliyah have far too much money invested still in British assets. You don't need me to tell you. The UK has been an underperforming economy for many years. Now it's facing, a very extended period of very slow economic growth, spiraling welfare bills, and an inability to grow as an economy. And that's reflected in very nominal increases in asset prices. The UK market has underperformed many key markets. UK property has barely kept pace with inflation over the last 15 years. There are better performing assets because they are placed or operate in better performing economies, of which Israel and the USA are perhaps the 2 best examples. Thirdly, taxation. People have touched on taxation already. Just going to add in a couple of other taxes that you may not be aware of. Lots of people put the money in an offshore bond. They're paying taxes in that bond, even though it's described as tax-free, because it's only tax-free to the recipient during the 10-year exemption period, but some tax is paid on the investment returns. Second tax to be aware of, as an example, is US estate tax, the American version of inheritance tax. If you have US assets, US funds, US shares, Apple, Google, Facebook, US property, and you fall outside the inheritance tax net once you've made Aliyah and spent an extended period living in Israel, then you may simply be swapping one estate tax liability for another if you don't plan your investments and structure them properly. The repatriation of capital risk would be the 4th big risk. Put your money in an offshore tax haven, and then when you want to bring it to Israel later, you may simply find the Israeli banks don't want to touch that money. So why stick it in the Isle of Man or Jersey or Guernsey or the British Virgin Islands when you can bring it straight to Israel? have as much, if not more, security of capital having it in Israel due to the way investments are held and structured here. And neither you nor from your children will ever have a problem bringing the capital to Israel at a later point because it's in Israel already. That can be a much sounder strategy than sticking in a tax haven for no good reason and actually plenty of potential disadvantages. The fifth big risk to expose yourself to is the advice deficit risk. If you're dealing with a UK stockbroker or a UK IFA, you're dealing with someone who does not understand fully the consequences of living in Israel, the financial realities of living in Israel, the tax and other rules and laws of living in Israel. You're not going to get the right kind of advice and support with sufficient technical backup because they aren't here. You need to be with a firm that's got an office here in Israel and advisors here in Israel, so that when you need to see someone, and this becomes really pressing in my experience in later life, when maybe you can't travel to the UK anymore, you need someone who's going to come and sit with you in your lounge and over a cup of tea give you the reassurance you need about your finances at that time. That's not going to happen if your advisor is stuck in London or Manchester. And the final risk is charges risk. Many things are expensive in Israel, and anyone on this call who comes regularly to Israel or lives here doesn't need me to tell you that. But some things are actually not more expensive in Israel, and one of them is to have your money managed. Quite frequently, I meet people who are making Aliyah, who have their money invested with leading UK firms, and they are being charged far more than they would be paying if they had their money managed here in Israel by a firm like Pioneer Wealth. If you're paying excessive fees, and many of these offshore bond structures in places like the Isle of Man and Jersey come with excessive fees, then to be blunt, far too much of your return is going to the investment managers and the IFA, and not enough is going to you, the client, because there are too many mouths to feed before the net profit falls in your lap. Charges risk, overcharging, high charges erodes the value of the returns over time and means you keep less of the gains yourself. So they're the real key risks I wanted to talk about today. There's plenty of information on my website. More than happy to help people plan their finances to give them financial security in Israel. Saw the list of attendees for the call and saw there's a couple of existing clients who are on the call, so they know that already themselves. But I'm always available to give advice and guidance. I do come to London once a month to see clients. I'm also available to see people on a trip to the UK. With that, I'll hand you back to Fran.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very helpful. Taylor, I think we're on to our last subject.
This is our second last.
Oh, it's our second last. Oh, that's right, because Dali's also speaking again. So, Gillian, our real estate partner at the firm, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon again. It's been really interesting to listen to the other panelists and bearing in mind the advice and recommendations that they've made. You can then come and look at your real estate portfolio and decide, what am I going to do with it? And I say real estate portfolio, it may not be a massive portfolio and it may be big. With the clients that I act for, everyone is obviously UK based and the property is in the UK. And you may find that it spans huge portfolios, industrial estates, commercial property, residential portfolios, or it may simply be the home that you're living in and one or two buy-to-lets. In any event, you're going to have to think about what you want to do with your UK property. So this is where a lawyer comes in. And I think in this situation, if you're moving to Israel, there'll be probably some incentive to sell or dispose of the portfolio because it can be difficult to manage from afar. And quite often the clients that I see that have made Aliyah tend to have UK agents or tend to come back quite a bit to keep an eye on management. There's obviously the tax consequences of having your assets in the UK. We've heard the very lucrative potential of having income and money and investment in Israel. And thirdly, if you're moving to Israel, you may just want a clean break. You may be of the view that you've had enough now of the UK. You want to clear your assets, take your cash, and go to Israel where you have complete flexibility and freedom to spend your income, and you've got liquidity as you see fit. And several individuals on this call could help if that is the case. So, you can. Predominantly what I do in my day-to-day role is act for people that are selling refinancing, asset management. I do act for buyers, and don't get me wrong, we do have clients that have made Aliyah who do still want to buy in the UK and have retained a portfolio. But I also get clients that come and say, we're going and we want to get rid of our portfolio and we want to get rid of it quickly. And Dalia alluded to that earlier, the urgency. And when I have clients who are in that boat, ultimately it is their decision as to how they manage and deal with the disposal of their portfolio or their properties. But usually a surefire, quick way of getting rid of your property is by auction. I do a lot of auction work in the UK with all the main auction houses. They're popular for buying if you're living in the UK and investing, but they're a very good option if you've got property you want to sell and you want to get out. And I am finding more and more the clients are taking up this option, and so I'm doing more and more auction work. Auctions are attractive because, as you may know, when you sell, it's a very different type of procedure to whenever you sell a property via private treaty or via an estate agent. If you're selling via an agent, you have the risk of chains, you have a risk of time scales, it can take a long time. Whereas with auctions, the attraction is that they're quick and the legal pack is very limited compared to what you would share in a traditional sale process. And that's not to say with auctions that you shouldn't disclose any information. Of course you must. And I always encourage clients to be completely open. But the big attraction is the 20 working day completion. So if you're getting out of the UK and Israel is on your agenda and you want to get rid of property quickly, auctions are a very popular and fast way to do it. I've had clients try both. I've had clients go through the private treaty process, which is when you go to an agent. The problems, as I say, and the risks that we face there is most of the time there's either chains, there's funding involved, the timescales, they don't move as quickly as clients want. I tend to find when clients have made up their mind, they just want to go. So they're looking for speed. And as a lawyer, I eat, sleep, and breathe real estate. You will find me working mostly 18/6. I'll work as much as I can, and we can certainly pull rabbits out of hats and do our best in that respect. But ultimately, what we can't do is control third parties. And that's kind of your benefit when you're weighing up the benefit of auctions versus private treaty. Whilst in some auctions, and not exclusively, you may take a hit on the price for the benefit of speed and certainty. With private treaties, you may get slightly more, but with the uncertainty and risk of a chain collapsing, and as I say, the time scales. Once you introduce a funder, you've got additional, a buyer will have additional considerations. And if you're trying to clear your assets and get out of the UK, it can be perhaps potentially not as attractive. If you decide that you do want to hold property in the UK, then you've got to be informed in terms of how that's going to work. You're living, miles away in another continent and you've got property in the UK. So you have to have the right structure and support to enable you to do that, because when there are problems, you need to be able to deal with them quickly. We saw this weekend in Manchester, a huge fire at a mill in Middleton, which probably won't be familiar to most of you, but is very well known to me. My background is industrial. And if you are that person with the property, with the mill on fire, managing an asset from afar can be challenging. In terms of the clients that I see who are based in Israel but live, but have assets in the UK, as I mentioned, they have agents, but even that isn't quite the same, because traditionally as a solicitor, you want to hear it from the horse's mouth. You want the pressure from the client. You want to know what's driving them, motivating them, why they need things quickly. An agent can do that to an extent, but they're the mouthpiece for the client. It's not quite the same. And it can be harder work whenever you are abroad in Israel trying to manage your asset in the UK. So there would have to be a long-term thinking around what the cost benefit analysis would be. Don't get me wrong, plenty of people do it, but with the attractive tax breaks that we've heard about in the call, I would, if a client came to me and said, I'm thinking about making Aliyah, what are my options? say, I'm not having this conversation without Claire or Dahlia on the call, or Andrew even on the call, because you've got to look at this holistically. You can do whatever you want, and whatever you want to do as a real estate lawyer, we will accommodate. I will work with you and, facilitate the legals. No problem at all with that. But you're going to have plenty of options, but it will need to tie into the bigger picture of your future plans, your family, inheritance, tax position. So lots to talk about in terms of real estate. And if you do have any questions, please, that I haven't covered, please feel free to reach out and I'd be delighted to assist.
Thank you, Gillian. I've noticed that a bunch of questions have come through, which is great. And we will try and address them towards the end. But just so you know that we will circulate a summary of today's call. And if there are questions that are not extremely specific, we will do most asked questions and some answers on the crib sheet as well that will circulate. So don't worry, we're not ignoring you. We will try and address everyone that's asking things. I think lastly, it's over to you, Dahlia. You're on mute. We can't hear you, Dahlia. Sorry.
Sorry, thank you. One of the main issues that people have started to obviously ask way in advance before coming here would be the actual practicalities of opening up a bank account in Israel. And that is full on into the bureaucracy. So I would recommend, and I'm going to give you a few pointers, what are your options in first of all, how to open up a bank account smoothly, get prepared beforehand, and also maybe at the end I'll speak about an option where you can't open up a bank account just yet and you do want to start transferring money over to Israel. So I would probably recommend, first of all, for you to check out what bank you want to open with. We have several main banks here in Israel, large banks, obviously registered banks, including Bank Hapoalim, Discount, Leumi. And today you usually don't really choose the bank according to where the branch is closest to you today, or maybe where the bank clerk is nicest to you today, because very, very quickly the branch which is closest to you will close down, and usually that clerk even sooner will probably definitely move from her desk as soon as you've become friendly with her. So I would look at different reasons why to open banks today. Many of the banks are being very, very, they publish a lot online all the time, different advantages that you have if you go to open up a new bank account here. Some of them give you cash back. Some of them put cash into your account on day one. And most of them give you a lot of different exemptions from fees to open up the account. Even though as an Oleh Chadash, as a new immigrant, you should also receive from the Ministry of Absorption also a certain amount as a benefit of waivers of charges when you open up different bank accounts. You should do your homework beforehand and also think kind of what kind of accounts do you want to open? Do you want a saving? Do you want a euro? Do you want a pound? Most banks here can offer all the different types, and you usually have them in one account. And again, you should think about what kind of credit cards you use here. Relatively speaking, they're very easy to give out credit cards, but usually if you're probably on Oleh, they will require you to put a lump sum in your account, but you could find yourself very quickly with several credit cards, so be careful what you sign. In regards to your kids, you can open a bank account for yourself and your spouse, but usually you have to be physically both there at the bank. And I'll talk about in a minute how you open it through an app. Children over 16 can have their own bank account, but they have a bank account where they can withdraw just up to 400 shekels a day. And they will be asked, for example, where that money is coming from, and you do need to justify where the money that you put into the bank account is coming from. But your younger children under the age of 16 can also have bank accounts which will be closed with sometimes very high interest. So actually for my son's bar mitzvah, we got even a 12% interest when we closed it for 10 years. So, you have to discuss with the bank, and it's a bit like a Turkish market where you can actually bargain quite a lot of things. Now, most banks, such as Hapoalim, have an app to open up your first account. Unfortunately, I'm going to tell you this in advance, most people use the apps for everything and they are all in Hebrew. So far, I haven't found one bank that has an app in English, and I think there is some legal regulatory issues about that being in English. But at that point, you'll just have to have a friend to help you. And so opening the bank account through the app, you can usually do it on video, or you can book an actual meeting. In regards to the documents, I think you should prepare. So the first most important document is either a good scan or your physical foreign passport, your Taudat Zeut or your ID card. And if you haven't received your Taudat Zeut, because sometimes it takes a while to actually receive the actual card, your Taudat Ole, which is your certificate that you receive upon making Aliyah. That should be sufficient. You should have some funds to put into the deposit, thus to activate it on day one. And you should receive from the airport an actual document called a note of future bank account, which is an official note. Keep that piece of paper for the bank. And that's in order to transfer any government funding that you should receive at the very beginning. Take time. There are many, many forms to sign and a lot of information. And it's highly recommended that maybe you go with a friend to the bank account to open it, and usually go about an hour before it closes, because it will take at least an hour. What I do recommend is also that you have available your foreign tax ID documentation. So if you're coming from the UK, that's either your national insurance number and some certificate to show that, or some people call it the NINO. And if you're also a business, then maybe also your UTR as well. Have that with you. If you're an American citizen at the same time, even if you are coming from the UK, I would also have your W-9 or Social Security and all of those documents as well. American citizens are actually scrutinized much harder than British. Most people that will appear on the bank account must be present. You're going to be signing a lot of forms declaring that you declare tax in the UK. So ensure that you understand everything that you're signing. You're signing a lot of anti-money laundering forms and a lot of information about your foreign income. Your credit card will usually be issued via your bank. It's quite rare that you get a credit card outside your bank, but there are options. For example, a lot of the time in the supermarket, they'll offer you something, but that would be, again, via your bank. And your credit card can be used as an ATM as well. Just some practicalities. If you're ordering a checkbook, for example, it takes between 3 to 7 days. Usually you need to pick it up from the branch, but today you can actually pay a courier. It will come to get it as well. So I'm just putting all these things so you can kind of plan as well. When does my checkbook arrive? And most people that receive checks today, they scan the checks into their app in order to receive them. If you are depositing cash, and quite a low amount of cash, I definitely would recommend that it will be in shekels. The bank will charge a very, very high conversion just to change it if you have a foreign currency. So do not bring them, £1,000 and tell them to deposit into shekels. They'll hide it. If you're looking for a mortgage as well, especially, after you've been at Gillian, sold your property in the UK and have some money now to put in, you can take that mortgage from any bank, but you should already have one bank as your regular bank account. You don't need to go to the same bank for a mortgage. You can actually shop around to different banks. Don't be surprised if the bank offers you a loan on day one. In the UK, it doesn't usually happen, but in Israel, it definitely could happen. So be ready for that. And you can definitely bargain on the conditions. And obviously for security wise, bankers will not give you any information on the phone unless you have a specific banking code number. So when you open up your bank account, ask them what your banking code number is, and then you can actually activate certain things, usually on the telephone instead of having to go into the bank. So those are usually the banks. If you are also considering transferring large amounts of money, there are actually several platforms that are regulated today that will allow you to transfer over $10,000 at a time at a much, much more competitive rate than the banks will give you. And you can email me afterwards and I can give you some of those details and refer you over. But that also is a very good solution if you're buying property here in Israel before you've made Aliyah and you want to pay, for example, your contractors, or you have expenses that you need to pay on the refurbishment. So contact me afterwards, and there's a couple of very good platforms that will allow on that issue. Yeah, and I think that's the end of that.
Thank you, Dahlia. Okay, we've got a bunch of questions. So I think this is for Claire. At what point slash day, after this is from David, after making Aliyah, are you a non-UK resident?
Okay, so as we mentioned before, the UK and Israel won't necessarily agree on the date that you've become resident or non-resident. So your Aliyah date isn't necessarily the date that you become non-UK resident. The date you become non-UK resident could be the end of the tax year, so the 5th of April, or you could try and elect for it to be in the middle of a tax year subject to conditions. So I would recommend getting UK tax advice, looking at your days spent in the UK, when you hope to make Aliyah, if you're going to travel back and forth during that tax year, to determine the exact date that you become non-UK resident. And it's the date that you become non-UK resident that impacts the UK tax, and vice versa for Israel.
Thank you. Next question. Oh, Dahlia, you gave an example. In Dahlia's example, what person will be taxed in the UK in your example? You want me to talk about someone who's earning active income and passive income?
Yeah, so I think that's probably more for Claire, that question. But essentially, if somebody is receiving a salary in the UK, but actually living here in Israel, so the question will be when they'll become tax resident here in Israel in order to be charged. But their salary will continue to be taxed in the UK as regularly. However, the benefit will be, and this is what the new law will try to promote, is that if you are not actually giving a service from within Israel, and it could be that, for example, this business has no connection to Israel, you are not working with any Israeli customers, you're not selling anything in Israel, but your position in the UK remains even though you're physically here in Israel, then your salary will not be taxed here in Israel. You will be exempt and you can continue receive your salary. So I think that's the answer to this one.
Thank you. And the next question is, I didn't understand the risk about why it would be advantageous to move investments to Israel where they are taxed as opposed to offshore where they are not. I think that's for Andrew. I know Andrew's got to drop off any minute.
Oh, we're fine. I can stay on a little bit longer, Fran. So that's a good question. And I would actually go back to the person who told you that, because if they're a professional, they should know better than to tell you something that is absolutely not true. Any investments held in any currency apart from shekel, anywhere in the world, including in Israel, are tax-free for the first 10 years on investment returns, income and gains. I'll say it again. Income and gains are tax-free in pounds, dollars, Swiss francs, euros, any currency you want to think about, even if the money is held in Israel. There are professionals out there who tell you otherwise. They're not telling you what's correct. I'd question their ability if that's what they're telling you.
Thank you. If I have Israeli citizenship and a passport through my parents, though I never made Aliyah, would I still benefit from the 10-year rule, just as Olim Chadashim? I think that's for Dahlia, really, because it's really about immigration.
So specifically, the law today is trying to bring over and attract both. It's called Toshav Choser, and that is somebody that actually used to live in Israel, and also new Olim as well. So the authorities will check whether you fall under one of those two categories, and then once you are deciphered whether you're under either one of those categories, then you will be eligible for the benefits. If somebody was born as a citizen but never made Aliyah to Israel, so again, you have to specifically look for the tax benefits whether they fall under that category or not.
So just to jump on, if that's okay. So for the returning resident, so you have a passport and citizenship. If you've been outside of Israel for 5 years, and this is all after the tax benefits came into play in 2007, then you would also have the 10-year tax exemptions. Just to a point, sometimes if you're traveling back and forth, Israel might think that you are still here. So for those people who are between the two countries, it's always best to clarify.
Thank you, Claire. Jeremy has sent in a question which is relevant for Gillian. What are the downsides of auctioning your primary residence?
So the downsides of auctioning your primary residence, I mean, I don't see many people selling their primary residence in auction. They tend to be investment properties, inherited properties. Usually, when it's your primary residence, it's your life's work and it's your life's worth, and it's very precious to you. And you're going to want to get as much money as you can now. That means that most people will go to a traditional estate agent down the road and say, I want to put my property on the market in the usual way. When it's an owner-occupied property, like it's your residential home, I think people are less inclined to go to auction. Now, it's not exclusive, it's not exhaustive. You can sell your primary residence at auction. It's just pricing sometimes means that, if you don't want to take a hit on your pride and joy, it means that you may not choose to sell your property at auction. So there's no reason why you can't. And if you're driven by time and speed and you just want a quick sale and to get out, then auction is a very attractive option. It can quite often be like a bit of a panic sale when you're selling at auction if you need cash quickly. But there's no reason why you can't sell at auction. And I'm sure I've done it. If I think back over my 20 years, I'm sure I'll have an example or two, but mostly it tends to be, as I say, investment and inherited. But no, let me know if you'd like to have a chat about that and we can explore that further.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and Jeremy. I suspect the answer is yes, but I don't know, and it's really for Andrew. If I bring my investment portfolio to Israel, will it benefit from the 10-year tax exemption?
So the answer is yes, as long as the investments are not in shekel, it will benefit from the 10-year tax exemption.
Okay. The next question, is that UK tax point, 5th of April, essential to make Aliyah before and sell your UK business after critical? Or can it be that the UK business you can sell it after you made Aliyah, even after the 5th of April? So that's a question on business, a corporate tax question. I don't know if Claire, you want to answer that, or we can.
Yes, I'm just reading the question now. I think you're asking if you make Aliyah, should it be at the end of a tax year and at which point to sell your UK business? But again, it doesn't have to be at the end of a tax year. Again, especially if you can benefit from the split year tax rules. And then whether or not you should sell before the timing of your UK business. There are tax reliefs that are in place in the UK and obviously tax reliefs in Israel. So you would need to compare the two based on your type of business, how much money's in the business, if you're actually if you're selling to a third party, if you're selling to a related party, etc., of the timing of when to do that.
Maybe this is for Dahlia. Can you tell me about, I think we're going to do 3 more questions and then we'll tackle them in the crib sheet that will circulate to everyone. But let's just do the next 3. Dahlia, can you tell me about a bank account which is tax-free in Israel if it's in foreign currency?
I'm trying to understand that. What do you mean by tax-free? Don't quite understand the question, but Andrew, do you want to answer this one?
I'm going to say any bank account that's in a currency other than shekel is tax-free for the first 10 years, at least.
You would get many exemptions as an Oleh Hadash for different transactions that you make. and you would get a lot of exemptions if you're. You do obviously have to declare the where the money is coming from, but you would have exemptions as well on these issues. But I think the question needs to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah, I'm an Israeli citizen, currently a non-Israeli resident, and married to an American citizen. These are getting quite specific, aren't they? Um, he'll be an Oleh Hadash when we move to Israel in 2027. Can I open a joint account prior to moving to Israel? Don't know who wants to answer that. Can you open up an account before? I guess you can, but someone should be able to answer that, and there's more than me.
With the bank's accounts in Israel, they would definitely ask to see your Taudat Zeut. So the question, if you're opening up a joint account, you and your spouse, you would both have to be there. It doesn't sound like your husband has a Taudat Zeut at this point, or Taudat Oleh. And you yourself, as an Israeli who hasn't lived in Israel for a long time, may no longer have a Taudat Zeut. We have a lot of clients that are stuck in a loophole whereby they are Israeli citizens, but the Misrad Panim or the Ministry of Interior will not grant them because they're not resident here any longer. So you can't abuse the system. You have to go through the system. If you want to consider yourself as a resident, you need to reside here, receive the correct certificate and status, and then obviously the banks are happy to open, but they don't want to take any chances with anybody that they're going to be breaching any rules, because that will be a big problem for all the banks after that.
Thank you. We're gonna answer live the last question, and I promise you we will address all the questions. I can see there's more coming through, but we addressed all of the questions that came through in the last webinar on our sheet, and it will come to you in the next like 48, 72 hours. So we're not ignoring you and we're not dismissing you, but we're just a bit tight for time. So the last question is that Andrew said it's best to hold money in shekels, not dollars or pounds? Question mark.
Okay, so very quickly, there's no uniform answer. It's depending on the overall wealth you've got, the income you've got, the currency that income's in, and a whole host of other factors. What I'm saying is it's very, very dangerous to bet against the shekel, have all your eggs in currencies other than shekel, and hope to live financially secure in Israel for the rest of your life. Because for the last 20 years, that's been a massive losing strategy. Sometimes it's worth paying a bit of tax, and to get financial security and peace of mind by eliminating currency risk on some of your money, often that can be a really good thing in my experience.
Thank you. And I think all your questions will be answered. I reiterate that again. It's helpful if you give us your name because we can answer you directly. One of our panelists can email directly, but if you're anonymous, it doesn't matter. We'll still email everyone answers to the questions. I just want to thank Andrew, Dahlia, Gillian, and Claire, and Scott who had to jump off for their time, and everyone who joined us today. And we hope you enjoyed it. We've got our third part in the 3 webinar series. It's actually the end of April after Pesach on businesses, leaving your businesses in the UK running, managing them from here. What considerations do you need to address? That will be with Mazars and our head of business law, Richard Hyman, who's our head of corporate and commercial, and Dahlia, of course. And we'll be discussing issues that relate to really corporate and business stuff when you want to run your business from abroad. Thank you, everybody, and wishing everyone a Chag Sameach.